So the presenter is Abdullah Kassim and Krittika Vasudevan from Kent and Midway Medical School, United Kingdom, retired. So the time is yours.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Abdullah Kassim.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Krittika Vasudevan.
And we are medical students from Kent and Midway Medical School. And today we present a paper along with the support and supervision of Hannan, who's in the audience, and Soumya Manna from the School of Engineering, Canterbury Christchurch University. Today our paper presents a novel design could you go back? For Parkinson's tremor suppression by using a passive attenuator system. Next slide, please. So, Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease is a neurodegenerative disorder. It is due to the degeneration of the substantia nigra, which means that people with Parkinson's are unable to produce dopamine. Dopamine is needed in the brain for the initiation and determination of movement. Now, because of this, the people will present usually with symptoms like bradykinesia, which is slow movement, unstable gait, which they're unable to maintain their posture or unable to be balanced, muscular rigidity, and tremors. However, despite this, there are some treatment therapies for people with Parkinson's. So, one example is the use of physiotherapy and occupational therapy, as shown here. Now, physiotherapy is used for exercise support, and occupational therapy are to provide for services in the household for those who may suffer from falls. But one of the main lines is medication, and the first line medication in the UK is levodopa, and levodopa provides dopamine into the brain for the users to manage the symptoms. However, there are some side effects. For example, nausea, vomiting, sleepiness, and ironically, one side effect is dyskinesia, which is uncontrollable movements like tremors and jerks. Next slide, please.
So, instead of using medication, we wanted to provide support with an alternative mechanism. And this is using a biomechanical assistive device, using an orthosis. And we did some further research into symptoms of Parkinson's and wanted to focus on rest tremors. Now, tremors are pathophysiological, and they can occur in the head, the neck, the lips, and the upper limbs, with the greatest and highest frequency of tremors occurring in the wrist. So to understand this more, we wanted to look into the biomechanics of the wrist. We understand that the wrist has 2 degrees of freedom, so wrist flexion and extension, which looks something like this, and then radial and ulnar deviation, which looks something like this. And this table right here shows the full range of movement. And with this, we looked into some current designs of Orthosis devices. Next slide, please. So, from our literature review, we looked at 5 prospective designs, with the key highlight being the air balloon design right here. Reason being is that it provides a complete range of motion alongside flexion extension and radial ulnar deviation. And it's also a very lightweight device, and it can be adjusted by changing the pressure to fit the attenuation for each patient. However, a problem with this is that because it's using air, there could be leakages, and it has to be placed quite tightly on the hand for the attenuation to occur. Now, these other devices that you see here, we discussed further into our paper, and this helped us create our design criteria. Next slide, please.
So, having a look at the design criteria, we can see that there are some pros. Some allow for complete range of motion, and some allow to reduce more than one tremor, such as the flexion extension and the radial and ulnar deviation. However, there are some cons that persist with these design studies. So, for example, they're quite heavy, especially on the wrist joint, and they impede activities of daily living. Activities of daily living include like going out to shop or doing things to do in your household, which we should all be able to do. And one study suggests that if these cons actually persist, users are less likely to wear and accept using that device. So we wanted to design our own criteria. And our design criteria that we propose is to allow for comfortability. For example, for design to be used on a hand to spread out their fingers, use their digits. Additionally, we want them to wear it with ease and to take it off with ease. And lastly, after purchasing the device, they should be able to maintain it to make it easier for them without having to go through a rigorous process. Next slide, please.
So this is our 3D design for our prototype. As you can see here, this is showing one half of the box with springs. And this is the slider that will fit right into the groove here. And attached to the slider is also a ball and socket joint. Next slide, please. And this shows the complete prototype here. So we see the ball and socket joint from the previous picture, and we see the rods attached to it, along with a brace that will go into the hand and will sit on the hand as well. And the junction here with the brace and the rod will be a ball and socket joint as well to prevent the rod from snapping. Next slide, please.
Right, so having a look at the design, we can see that the pre-design is being put into a prototype. And the slider mechanism allows for an antagonistic arrangement of just 2 compression springs, which means regardless whether they do a flexion, extension, or a radial or ulnar deviation, the slider will move in a bidirectional movement regardless, and this will suppress for unwanted tremors from occurring. One thing we want to highlight is that we propose that the cost of this device may be around $20, and this excludes the manufacturing cost. The reason why I highlight this is because around over 50% of patients are willing to spend over $1,000 for orthosis devices like these. Next slide, please. So having a look at the sensor-based, having a look at this array of diagrams, I'll walk you through it. So although we have no prolonged testing data available, we do want to demonstrate that a way that we can assess the device's durability and efficacy. We use sensor-based methods, and this uses an accelerometer and a gyroscope through 3 axes. Now, on the graphs demonstrated here, as you can see, it's a bit blurry, but the graph was able to capture the simulated sudden jerks from 4,000 to 16,000, which means that our sensor-based methods can actually capture the Parkinson's, the tremors with those with Parkinson's disease. Next slide, please. Now, we do recognize that there are limitations, and we do want to propose some future scopes for our study. So, one thing we'd like to change is the design of the prototype box. We'd like it to match the shape of the forearm, around here. Additionally, we'd like to change the design of the brace. We'd like it to cover more of the palmar and the dorsal surface of the hand, so it's more comfortable. Additionally, we want to downscale the device, so it's much more smaller. And lastly, we do recognize that patients with Parkinson's disease show differing frequencies of tremors, between 3 to 10 Hz in some studies say. However, by using the sensor-based approach, we hope for increased personalization of the attenuator system, which means they can change it based on the preference of the liking. Next slide, please.
So, to conclude, our paper highlights a novel spring-based design to do with tremor suppression in Parkinson's patients. And we targeted flexion extension tremors alongside radial ulnar deviation, as well as providing a full range of motion. The device is also very lightweight and can allow patients to do their day-to-day activities as well. In the future, we would like to do further testing to allow calibration and optimization of the device to meet the patient's needs, which is really important. And we are also planning to change the design, so change the size of it to make it smaller and also increase the comfort for the device for the patient as well. Next slide, please.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Oh. One slide back.
Thank you very much for listening. Any questions?
thank you for your presentation. Now we move to the question and answer session. So,
okay, thank you for great research. I think I just to know how we can validate your prototype.
Thank you for answering that question. It's an excellent question. So within the UK, mainly because this is where we mainly get our studies from, we in the NHS have orthosis specialists. So we wish to hopefully collaborate with them on designing and implementing it for patients. And especially if we're using that sensor-based approach we talked about, the allow for personalization means that people can come into the clinic and actually discuss whether they like it best suited, so whether they feel, oh, I feel that I'm unable to move my hands a bit more, let's reduce the, let's say, adjust the spring constant, because it uses springs in the mechanisms. So from there they can calibrate it if they wish. But we're hoping that actually in future changes of design, that patients can actually change the spring itself. So perhaps they may want to increase it or decrease it based on the activities they want to do. So that's something we're hoping to look for in the future. But thank you for asking this question.
So meaning that you just what we call measure the user certification or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. So of course this is going to be used on addition with medication as well. But perhaps some people would like to use this Orthosis device and may come into clinic, and this may be a suggested treatment therapy for them. So this does need to be clinically monitored, so especially in the UK, this medical device is considered a class 1A, which means that we'll need to look at how it's used within a wider population and actually to see how the people respond to it, essentially. So yes, it does need to be regulated by government. Thank you.
No, all right.
So this isn't a preventative device, because the reason for this design is to reduce the tremors, but it doesn't stop the tremors. So people with Parkinson's disease, they'll still have this condition regardless, doesn't stop it at all, but it's just to reduce it so that it improves the activities of daily living. So suppose, let's say it's too much, perhaps that the medication used for too long and has caused an increase in tremors, then maybe they'd like to use this to improve their well-being and life in general. No worries.
okay, thank you for the question and also for the answer. Because the time is up, so I think that is all from Abdullah, Kassim, and Krittika Vasudevan.